He went out of his way to praise professors, presidents of the universities. He vows that the government crackdown on the riots are intended to restore stability. Premier Lee said he hopes the students in this square. We're just watching something there. We temporarily lost our microwave picture. I'm told that our crew there in the scene is changing batteries. We have to do that in the field. You can imagine the batteries we're using up down there. Here we go. We're back with the live picture now. These young people now are coming up with their arms attached. Mike Chenoy, it appears they're trying to put up a human barrier.
That's right, Bernie. The students are moving out into the center of the Avenue of Eternal Peace, Chang'an, trying to form a kind of human barrier, a mass of people linking arms in an attempt to keep the security forces, when they come in, from breaking up this process. There's a frantic activity here as the students are trying to take over the center of Chang'an Street. Both ends of the street, the roads leading out of the square are absolutely blocked with people. We have heard reports that some of the buses that were in the square, that at least a couple of them were earlier moved out of the square, placed in the middle of Chang'an Street, and their tires were slit in order to block the access route for the soldiers that have been deployed. The students are clearly not going to give up without a struggle. They are massing here just as the Chinese leadership continues to broadcast to them. The students prepared to make a last stand, the climax of a month of protest that has changed the face of China. We're now waiting for the next move from the authorities. Mike Chenoy, CNN, reporting live from Tiananmen Square in Beijing.
And Mike, I have found an important quotation I was taking down as Premier Lee was addressing the people of China. Our viewers might recall at one point he said, if you still go to Tiananmen Square, you're putting the demonstration to a very dangerous line. Premier Lee said that the city of Beijing and the police of Beijing will cooperate with the army in cracking down on the riot. That's his word, riot. He promised to continue moving on the reforms that the students demanded be made by this government.
Bernie?
And that is the situation, yes.
What I was going to say was, it seems to me that the Lee's speech was very, very carefully crafted to try and do a couple of different things. Number one, to make it clear that the law and order issue was paramount and that the government would not tolerate this kind of chaos in the streets under any circumstances. However, he did hold out, at least theoretically, some olive branches to the students, expressing sympathy for the concerns they had raised about corruption. He said nothing about the concerns they had raised about democracy or about a free press. He also said that the chaos had to come to an end for China's open policy and modernization program to succeed, and he accused them of blocking that progress. However, I think it's fair to say that Lee and the hardliners in the leadership have been very, very cautious on moving ahead with reforms, and so while there was any kind of riot here, is simply not true. Bernie?
I was also intrigued by Premier Lee saying that because the Beijing police authorities are so physically exhausted and because they've not been able to get much sleep, the army is being called in to help them. Steve Hurst, do you see any sign of troops?
Bernie, we've seen nothing of troops yet, but our view is completely blocked, looking both ways from the square here by this mass of demonstrators who have formed up in the street. The last we heard that they were inside the inner ring road, and I suppose that they're moving slowly. It's interesting that you mentioned the reports of martial law being imposed here. I think that is exactly what they plan to do. I think maybe that they're going to bring the troops into the town, and one of these speeches might be going to say, now look, we told you 12 o'clock you had to be out of the square. We've got troops in town. We're imposing martial law. We're going to give you a little bit more time, but you're going to have to get out of the square. It's very confusing as to what he might have planned, because the logistics from here, looking around the square, are going to make it very tough to move these people out peaceably. They're going to have to come in swarms, first of all, to break the lines to get into the area of the square. However, when he speaks of protecting government buildings, the Great Hall of the People, where this speech went on, is right adjacent to the square, and they could put a lot of troops around that building and move maybe quickly out of there. We just lost some lighting in the square. I don't know what that means. Several of the lights on each light pole has gone out. Mike has a comment here.
Unless I'm mistaken, Premier Lee's speech was broadcast from the Great Hall of the People. Is that correct, Bernie?
One would think so, but that's my guess. We'll tie that down very shortly.
That's just off the square, and there must be some fairly massive security for the leadership to get into the Great Hall, although it is believed there are underground passages connecting the Great Hall with the compound where the senior party and government leaders normally live and work. But I think just out of
square, when Communist Party chief Zhao Zhang, who opposed a crackdown on the students, offered to resign. Now, thousands of students reportedly ended the six-day hunger strike, but vowed to continue a pro-democracy sit-in in the square. Students have apparently formed a human barrier, linking arms to keep from being moved. So far, the government's reaction to strikers is described as calm and tolerant, but things are very unsettled. And of course, we will keep you...
Since the government-imposed deadline for vacating Tiananmen Square came into effect, however, at this hour, tens of thousands of students and their supporters are in the square, and the soldiers that were deployed to clear them out, at least a lot of them, are stuck several miles away with students, huge crowds of them, blocking the roads. We're getting reports that students have climbed onto the trucks, that they put newspapers across the windshields of the trucks, in some cases let the air out of the tires on the trucks, so that up to now the soldiers have not been able to move. At both ends of Tiananmen Square, large crowds have gathered to form...
By the size and the determination of the demonstrators, USI is one of the best known...
This is the scene around Beijing, 5-6 miles away from these pictures where it was taken. This area was taken in western Beijing. One could hear people in the streets just outside our hotel just a short while ago shouting, demonstrating, and the troops cannot move. The people in the streets appealing to soldiers of the Chinese army, don't do this. Don't go down to Tiananmen Square. Join us. Be with the people.